see you guys in the dark.
When I was little, every few years my family would go back to my mom's hometown, and we'd camp there for about a week or so during the summer when I was on summer break. And this place, Edgewood, is a pretty small town. It has a population of 200 to 250 people, give or take, and was in a very rural part of the province surrounded by forests and rather out of the way with a close-knit community of people who all knew each other. My mom and stepdad and my 3-year-old sister stayed at our family friend's house to visit, but as soon as I sat down, my mom told me to take the dog for a walk and gave me a $5 to take with me to the convenience store along the way so that I could get an ice cream or a drink, which I was thrilled with. So off I went. The walk to the store was pretty uneventful. The town is incredibly small, and practically everything was within walking distance. The convenience store was about a 5-minute walk away, so I didn't have a hard time finding my way there. Once I bought my Pepsi, I went ahead and sat outside in the front of the store in the shade, taking a moment to sip at my drink before heading back to the house. That's when a blue car pulled up. I wasn't in the area often, so I didn't recognize anybody I met beyond the few family friends my mom would take us to visit every time we were in town. The person in the car rolled down their window and looked over at me, offering a smile and a wave. She looked rather unkempt and appeared to be in what I could only assume was her mid-50s. She was dirty, her hair was messy, and her car was covered in rusty spots with cracked and damaged windows. I glanced up, offered a polite smile, and went back to my drink. It wasn't uncommon for people to be friendly in that community, so I didn't think anything of it for the most part. She called out to me, "Hey there, what's your name?" I looked up again, a bit hesitant to say anything. I was a bit shy around new folks. Kayla, I answered, not saying much else. I did get taught about stranger danger, but given that this town was a very small, tight-knit community, it didn't cross my mind at the time. I assumed I was safe. "Well, Kayla, I've got this makeup here, and you can have it if you want. I think you'd look beautiful with this makeup. Do you want to come and try it on? I can help you put it on." That was what made the first siren go off in my head. I shook my head, telling her, "No, that's okay. I don't wear makeup." I was literally 10 and was pretty tomboyish. I never had an interest in makeup, and from a stranger, even less so. I was getting uncomfortable and getting up to leave, as she was insistent on getting me to at least give it a try. I kept saying no and proceeded to start walking away when she offered something else. "Well, what about a muffin? I've got these muffins that are too good to keep to myself. I've got a bunch in the back if you want to come and take one." That was Siren 2. I knew 2 things about walking around by myself anywhere. 1, don't ever take food candy from strangers. 2, don't ever get into a van, a car, or a truck, any vehicle with someone I didn't know. I said no again and explained that my family was waiting for me. She looked annoyed at this point and insisted again. "Well, I can drive you back, but you just need to get in the car." She was snapping at me at this point, and I was reasonably rattled. I didn't say anything else, and instead hurried off with my dog, hastily enough to where I forgot to even take my Pepsi with me. I don't know why, but something in my head told me to not lead the woman to the house my family was at. So instead, I walked off to the campsite, which was about another 5 minutes away. I figured she wouldn't have any reason to follow me to a campsite that likely had other people there in case she wanted to try anything. But of course, here's where I was wrong. The campsite was particularly empty that day, and it's not really monitored by anybody, so this was probably the dumbest idea I could have had. I walked along the path that led to the road full of campsite lots, and sure enough, one glance behind me sent chills down my spine and my stomach sank. The woman was following me in her car. She was a good 10-15 meters away, but was keeping pace with me, like she was waiting for me to stop. I panicked, picked up my dog, and walked a bit faster down the road to see if I could get anybody's attention and ask for help. In my panic, I found one man who was setting up his campsite, and I ran to him as fast as I could. I desperately tried to explain what was happening. I was on the verge of tears, explaining that someone who tried to get me into their car was following me. He hummed and eventually said, "Sorry, I've got my dog with me. I can't leave her here for long. I hope you find your way back," and left me on my own. Tears streamed down my face as I begged him one more time, but it didn't change his answer. I looked behind me and noticed that the blue car was gone. I thought that maybe she gave up or didn't want to be seen. But either way, I took this opportunity to sprint away again, desperately looking for somewhere that would let me sneak back to the house off of the main campsite road. Off the side of the road, there was a very thick array of bushes. I picked up my dog once again and ran off into the brush until I was far away enough and hidden enough from the road. I held my dog tight and patiently waited to see if the car would drive by, watching through the bushes. A few minutes passed, and sure enough, there she was, driving by again slowly, almost like she was looking for something. Once she drove off, I wanted to make a break for it, but something told me to stay right where I was. Another few minutes passed by, and the car was back. She had looped around, driving agonizingly slowly. And that wasn't the first time she looped around. She did this more times than I can even recall. I stopped counting at some point. At the final loop, I saw her park her car down the road a good 40-ish meters behind where I was hiding as she got out and started walking down the road, and again like she was looking for something. I was practically petrified. I laid there for God knows how long, waiting as she walked down the road. Eventually, I heard her mumble something and swear at the end of the sentence before she walked back up to her car. She had the hood of her car before getting back in and speeding off. I waited another half hour, give or take, before I finally plucked up the courage to grab my dog and run as fast as I could back to the house. By the time I had gotten there, my legs were shaking and I could barely stand. My lungs were on fire, and I was on the verge of tears again. My mom came out and scolded me for taking so long, asking me why I was gone for as long as I was. I broke out in tears, explaining to her what exactly happened and how I was followed and looked for at least an hour. She shrugged and explained that nobody here would do anything like that, and went back inside. Our family friend James pulled me aside and asked me to describe the woman and the car. He said, "We know a lot of people here in town. I might know who you're talking about." I told him everything I saw, and he hummed, glancing up while he pondered what he could recall about people he knew in town. "Yeah, I don't know anybody with a car like that here in town. I'll ask around and see if anybody else knows who you're talking about." The rest of the evening was pretty uneventful, but I stayed inside and refused to leave the house. James eventually pulled my mom aside to talk to her again, but I didn't hear their conversation. The remainder of the trip was otherwise calm, but for the rest of our time in town, I wasn't allowed to go anywhere without my mom or my stepdad, and any time I had to take the dog for a walk, one of them always came with me. I don't think I was ever alone again during that trip, excluding when I needed to use the washroom. Whatever James told my mom, I want to say that it got her to take me seriously.
I'm going to start out to say this isn't some flashy, scary story, and it doesn't have the most satisfying ending, but none got hurt, which I am grateful for. This all happened when I was in like grade 5 or 6. I'm Canadian, so we have primary school kindergarten to grade 8, high school grade 9 to grade 12 and 13, then college or university, so I would have been around 8 or 9 years old at the time. I'm now, as of writing, this 23 years old, going to be 24 in July, so my memory may be a bit foggy. But what happened this day will forever stand out to me. I, at the time, 8 or 9 female, and my sister, who was 2 years younger than me. Let's call her Paya. Went to a little French immersion school growing up. At the time, we were not living close to it, so we had to take a school bus. The bus stop where we would be picked up in the morning and dropped off in the afternoon was about a block or so away from the apartment buildings we lived in. My sister and I would get up at 7 a.m. and catch the bus for 7:30 a.m. to get to school for 8 a.m. There was another family that also caught the bus at our stop with some younger children, so we were never fully alone. But my sister and I made the walk there and home without any adult, because my mother worked nights and my sister and I thought we were old enough to walk the short distance alone. This is important later. This all happened during late spring. Think around April or May, when the weather was getting consistently hotter during the day, upwards of 20 degrees Celsius. I should also note that I have allergenic asthma, which means activities like running or strenuous exercise, as well as allergens like pollen, can and will trigger my asthma. For this reason, I wasn't a big runner, and seeing me run was a rare occurrence. So, in the morning, mind you, I am not a morning person. Bright and early at 7:15 a.m., my sister and I head out to go wait at the bus stop for the school bus. Everything was pretty normal, me being the more obviously tired one of us, but something stuck out to me. I noticed an old brown pickup truck parked in one of the driveways of a nearby house. A person sat in the driver's seat, seemingly doing nothing. This wouldn't have been weird, except I knew the people there drove a minivan. Maybe it was just how ugly the color of the brown pickup was, but it stuck out to me. In hindsight, I should have questioned why the guy in the truck just sat there in his vehicle for over 15 minutes, doing nothing. But I was too tired to care. Off to school we went, and the day was honestly forgettable in how routine it was. On the bus to go home, however, my sister and I got into an argument. So when we got to our stop, Paya took off running back to the house ahead of me, leaving me with the parents who picked up their younger children at the stop, and then after they left, I was alone. I was not impressed by the stunt my sister had pulled, but began my walk down the street with traffic near me going the same way I was walking. I was about a minute into my walk home when I noticed that brown pickup truck that looked oddly familiar. I hadn't realized it was probably the one from that morning, slowing down beside me as I walked. Now it was a pretty hot day out. One kid had collapsed during recess because of heat stroke, so I was having a hard time already due to the heat. The driver of this old brown pickup rolls down the passenger window to talk to me, waving a hand at me to get me to stop. I do stop, because I was raised to be polite. But I keep my distance, the patch of grass separating the curb and the sidewalk, meaning I had at least 60 cm of space between me and the curb. "Hey there, kiddo, where are you headed?" the driver, a man in his late 50s or so, asked. Now I had been raised knowing all about stranger danger, so I was already on guard about this. "Home? I told him, purposefully vague about it. At this point, the man leaned over and unlocked his passenger door, and I was able to see him a little better. He had a tattoo of what I think was a tiger and some other animals up his right arm. He wore a plain gray muscle shirt. I couldn't see what kind of pants he was wearing because I was short. His hair was a salt and pepper of gray and black, pulled into a low greasy ponytail. And he had a mustache. Not to profile, but like one of those stereotypical pedo stashes. His skin tone was tan, but he seemed to be Caucasian, and his hands were large with a scar across his knuckles. "How about you hop in and I'll give you a ride? It's pretty hot out today," this complete stranger offered me with a smile. And I noticed he seemed to have a missing tooth. I, of course, smiled back to not be rude, and simply said a polite, "No thank you, sir," and started walking again. Now this would have been fine and dandy if it had just ended at that. But instead he began keeping pace with me in his truck and insisting that I get in, that it was too hot out, and that all the other kids had been picked up now. This struck me as odd, and still does even now, because this meant he had been watching when all of us had gotten off the bus. Though I guess he didn't notice my sister run off, but still, this was creepy. I again said no thank you, but he didn't seem to take the hint. In fact, he became more pushy, and maybe a little irritated. He had pulled up so close to the curb he was almost jumping it with his pickup now, and at this point I was really feeling scared that this man might do something I wouldn't like. So I quickly said, "Have a nice day," and then took off running as fast as I could towards my apartment complex. I vaguely heard him shout something at me, but I just kept running, cutting over the grassy hill with a few trees on it, instead of staying on the sidewalk. I saw that someone had just left the underground parking area that connected two of the buildings, and ran in just before the big door that let cars out closed. I didn't stop running until I made it up to the 8th floor, got into my house and locked the door. At this point, I was in a full-blown asthma attack, as well as crying in fear. I collapsed against the door, hyperventilating and sobbing, and my sister was now freaking out at how I just burst in like that. But I couldn't get out what I was trying to say as I could barely breath. Eventually, I was able to calm down, and my mother came home from what she had been doing, and I was able to explain what had happened. My mother then called the police, and we had a female officer come interview me, to whom I recounted only what had happened on my way home from the bus stop, and the nice policewoman took my statement. Unfortunately, nothing ever came of the investigation, and it didn't help that I couldn't remember the license plate, other than it looked like it wasn't from Ontario, Canada, which in hindsight is even scarier to me. So I never really heard anything after that. But to the man who may or may not have tried to kidnap me on my way home from school, let's not meet ever.
This had happened around 2015 to 2016. I was living with somebody who worked an opposite schedule as me. He worked graveyard shift, and I worked during the day. So when I was getting up to get ready to leave for work, he was just coming home. On the nights during the week, I would obviously be home by myself. One night during the week, I was feeling especially lonely, and my favorite toy unfortunately had broke and died. So I decided to drive downtown to the 24-hour store to buy another one. The town I live in is a mid-sized suburban town filled with mostly residential areas. The main downtown area was essentially one small area on the way to the freeway. My apartment was about 10 minutes away. I pulled into the parking lot of the adult store. The parking lot was dark and had multiple entries all along that led to the bars and restaurants as well as the store. After parking my car, I walked towards the entrance to the store, which was on the street. To do so, I had to walk towards the driveway I came in to park. Upon walking to the entrance, I noticed a man was standing by himself smoking a cigarette. It was 1 a.m., and not normal, just to see only one person standing by themselves. I figured he was just one of the patrons from one of the bars on the block taking a cigarette break. As I walked past him, he said hi, to which I had responded with a quiet hi back, but didn't make eye contact with the man. Upon passing him, I had a better look at his appearance. He had a shaved head, wore a long white t-shirt, with shorts hanging past his knees. He had some sneakers on, with some tube socks that covered his skin. This is not unusual to see in my town, but I was more concerned that he was sitting by himself, and instantly took an interest in me as I walked past him. After passing him and continuing walking to the store, I see out of the corner of my eye the man proceeded to follow behind me. When I say follow, I don't mean he coincidentally was walking behind me. He immediately followed right behind me as soon as I passed him, making a point to maintain the same walking speed as me. I didn't know his intentions, but a man by himself that late at night is a recipe for trouble. As I looked down the dark and empty street, I weighed out my options of where to go. Initially, I thought, keep walking so he doesn't know that you happen to be going to the adult store. But since it was 1 a.m. and there was no one on the street, I thought that would be too dangerous. Then I thought, just go in one of the bars. But then I thought that would give him an easier introduction to approach me. So then I realized my best bet was to continue walking into the store, where I know was well lit and people would see me. I proceeded to shop for what I came there for. The man had entered the store right behind me, but hung out at the front of the store, so not to look like he was following me around. He wasn't even pretending to shop. He just sat at the front waiting for me. As I was shopping, I heard the man was making a psst noise, to which I had ignored. He wasn't getting the message. He continued making the psst sound as I continued to shop without noticing. Eventually, I walked up to the cashier, who was completely oblivious to what was going on. I tried to whisper to the cashier, "Do you know that man? Or does he even work here?" He asked me to repeat what I was saying. I had asked again, but still spoke in a quiet voice. Not understanding my attempt to be discreet, the cashier responded, "I can't hear you. Say it again, please." At this point, I felt my cover was blown. So in a more normal tone, I told the cashier the man on the front followed me from outside and won't leave me alone. I explained to him my car was parked in the lot behind the store, and I didn't feel comfortable going back to my car. The cashier said, "Okay." The cash wrap area was enclosed square and counter to maintain distance between the staff and the customer. The cashier walked in front by where the man was, and from behind the counter told the man to leave. He then came up and assured me that he told the man to go away, though the man did not. In fact, he continued to stay there, giving that I didn't want him to follow me to my car. I stayed in the store and pretended like I was still shopping, even though I had already found what I came there for. I would occasionally glance to the front to see if the man was still there. He was. I kept going up to the cashier, explaining the man wasn't leaving. So we went back up to the front to talk to him. I heard the cashier say, "Enough already. Just leave the store." While he was doing this, I went to the far back end of the store to remain out of sight. By the time I circled back to the cashier, I noticed the man was no longer in the store. The cashier said that he repeatedly and more assertively told the man to leave. He said the man had claimed he didn't understand English. The cashier then said he pulled a baton he kept under the counter for protection. He held it over his head and then asked the man, "Do you understand this?" To which the man had finally left the store. I made my purchase, but I was still worried about walking to my car. Even though I was parked in one of the first spaces when you came through the driveway, the cashier had pointed at a small TV behind him that had 4 angles of CCTV. He assured me the man was gone, and if I saw him to come back into the store real quick. He also said he will see me when I walk to the car. Even though I would have felt more comfortable with him walking me to the car, I understood he was by himself, and he couldn't leave the store unattended with customers. After my purchase, I sped walk to my car. I always have my keys at the ready when I'm walking to my car, so I promptly pressed the unlock on my car remote, got into my car, placed my bag of purchases on the passenger seat, and proceeded to start my car. Once my car was turned on, I took off the e-brake, put the car in reverse, and while putting on my seatbelt, I looked in my side view mirror to back out. It was at this point that I saw the same man. He was full on speed walking to my driver's side door. I was driving a Honda Accord at the time, and that model automatically locks all the doors when you take the car out of park. As soon as I saw him, I hit the gas and violently pulled out of the parking space. I pulled out so fast, it startled him and stopped him dead in his tracks. He was now standing right next to my driver's side door as I continued to pull out. I gave him the most serious dead stare I could, because I know most predators play off the fear of their victims. The stare must have worked. As soon as he saw me pull out while staring at him, he turned his head back to the driveway entrance and proceeded to walk back where he was standing. He had a look of defeat on his face. My face, however, was overcome with relief. I pulled out of the parking lot and took myself back home. I felt a bit of shame being by myself going out so late. I did tell my boyfriend about the incident when he came home at 6 a.m. He also told me going out that late by myself wasn't the smartest thing. I'm no longer with that person, but still I live in the same town, though I never leave my home for anything past 9 o'clock anymore. While the town that I live in isn't the most dangerous, there still isn't enough crime that occurs here. It's also not considered the most safest. I've wanted to share this for a few months, and being that it's currently 4:30 in the morning and I can't sleep because I still have residual fear that someone is lurking in my apartment, I thought that I would hop on and share. I bartend and had an awful night at work. I have thicker skin and can handle myself relatively well, but I had been sexually harassed by a man at the bar I worked at earlier that night. After he was kicked out from the establishment, I decided to stick it out. I even called my dad and talked with him, and he agreed that as long as I was physically safe and emotionally ready to finish my shift, I should. So I did. My boyfriend had waited for me in our shared ground level apartment despite having worked a full day himself, because I was really upset about the comments made to me earlier in the night. Now, visualize. We were laying in bed. Our bed is in the middle of the bedroom against the back wall, and we were just laying with our heads where our feet normally were. The TV was no longer playing anything, but was still on the media screen. He had his hand on my back, and he had just fallen asleep. I could tell by his breathing. I was scrolling on my phone, finally allowing the discomfort of the night earlier events to fade. Then I had heard it, the faintest words, or word, "Hello." I froze. I felt the milliseconds within the second expand. In the matter of moments, my eyes had darted to the TV, to my boyfriend, to my phone, and I thought, or more like desperately hoped, that I had experienced some type of auditory hallucination, thinking maybe that I was more tired than I realized. Then I heard it once again, clear as day, coming from my hallway. "Hello?" It wasn't loud. It was low, quiet, checking to see if I was asleep. Suddenly I realized I could see a figure in the hallway. All at once I realized the voice was coming from a person who did not belong in my home. I have not forgotten that feeling. The time of the break-in was at 4 o'clock. It's currently 4:44 a.m. I can count on one hand the amount of times that I've fallen asleep before 4 a.m. since this incident, and or have woken up around 3 a.m. If I do fall asleep before 4, to make sure everything is locked, I can't sleep. Anyways, I scream with all of my heart. I screamed. My boyfriend jumps up, awake, confused, yelling. He threw open the door, and there was the intruder, standing and staring into the darkness. We didn't know what he wanted. We honestly still don't. My boyfriend pushed him and told him to leave. This was on a Saturday night. We lived a 25-minute walk from the bars, which may seem far, which isn't as far as you would think it is. We both assumed he had the wrong apartment, until he coldly and calmly said, "I'll leave," turned around, not towards the front door, but towards the sliding patio door that has an enclosed patio. He slipped out so quietly, so quickly, and then he hopped my 4-foot fencing. We decided not to call the police because I was hysterical, confused, and in the moment convinced myself that they had the wrong apartment. It wasn't until we talked about the situation to more people that it was clear there was something more nefarious afoot. About 20 years ago, when I was 19, one of my first jobs was at an adult bookstore. Me and my best friend had gotten our first apartment together, and the Smut Hut was about 15 to 20-minute straight walk on a busy street. When we came out of our complex and turned left, there was a cemetery on the corner. There was a crosswalk at an intersection, then a Taco Bell on the opposite corner. Next to the Taco Bell was a gas station or a carryout. Then you walk over a small bridge. But it was dark at night and somewhat isolated for a very small stretch, and right after the bridge was a plaza that housed a strip club, a massage parlor, the porn shop I worked at, and a bar. So for the most part, it was fairly populated, busy area except for the small stretch of bridge. I didn't have my license, and I had worked third shift. My bestie would sometimes give me rides to and from work, but it was a Friday night, and she wanted to go out with friends, and I didn't have to be at work till nearly midnight, so I figured that I would walk. So I leave my apartment complex and walk past the cemetery to the crosswalk at the intersection. There was a guy leaning against the pole, smoking a cigarette, but there was a red light and the cross area for people to cross. I thought that it was weird that he didn't cross, but whatever. By the time I get to the actual corner, the light had turned green, so I lit up a cigarette and waited. He never said anything to me, so I kept him in the corner of my eye. The light had changed again, so I started crossing the street. I got about halfway across the street when he left the corner and also started to cross the street. I'd made note of this and continued walking. I passed the Taco Bell, and for the most part, he stayed a few feet behind me, but he had kept pace. When I was 14, I was followed from home from the bus stop, and because of this, I've always been hyper aware of people in their proximity to me. So I started to speed up. The guy behind me sped up as well. Now I'm coming up to the gas station, and after that is the bridge where it's dark and nowhere to run but forward. So I make a split decision to veer off the sidewalk, across the parking lot, and into the gas station. I practically ran the last few feet through the door. I went inside and ducked behind one of the rows of chips and cookies. Peered around the side. I saw the guy who was following me poke his head into the gas station and look around. He glanced around for a few seconds, and then he left. I called my coworker, who I would be relieving when I got to the store, and explained to him what had happened, and that I was too afraid to leave the gas station. He locked the store and came to pick me up. When he finally got there and picked me up, we walked out to the parking lot, and the guy wasn't there. Funny thing is, I never saw him again. After I attended a work related conference, I received a creepy LinkedIn connection request from Tom with a note saying, "We attended the same talk together. I like how you laughed, but we never got a chance to say hello." I don't recall the exact wording, but I hope that you get the idea of what he said. I found the message extremely odd because several folks saw my company t shirt at the conference, especially between the talks or during the meals, and spoke enthusiastically about my company's work. I deleted the LinkedIn invite without any further thoughts. About 2 days later, a long lost high school friend, Julia, had emailed me saying Tom attended my conference, saw me, but never got a chance to really connect. Julia explained Tom was her former client, maybe anxious about reaching out to people, and really, really wanted to meet me. She also got in contact with this guy in the email. Then Tom replied to the thread, starting a chat. I was pissed how she gave away my email address without my permission. I explained that I indeed did attend the conference, but I no longer add people I do not know on social media due to the number of online frauds. She had apologized to me. Then Tom connected requests to my social networks for friends and family. My other accounts are private, so I deleted the invites. Tom had followed my public work-related social account, copied the format of my account to his own, and reposted the content. I removed him from the followers, but the behavior didn't stop at all. I blocked him. But this, in theory, doesn't prevent him from seeing the content on a private window. The notion that Tom constantly rejected being rejected scared me. Not my first time encountering such kind of people. Some may say that I should give him a chance, but I really do not owe him an explanation. I had told my siblings about this, so that they're on high alert on any suspicious messages that they may receive. This happened a few weeks ago while I was in a Walmart parking lot. I always park far away from the front doors so that I could avoid door dings and scratches, as I don't mind walking just a little bit further. I'm also a woman that weighs about 110 pounds when drenching in water, so I'm walking back to my car from the store with a few bags of groceries. I can see my car. It's probably about 100 feet away from me at this point, when I see a man walk out in front between two cars and directly into my path. He asks me to spare him a few dollars, to which I tell him no, I don't have any cash on me. I try to walk away from him immediately, but he steps closer to me and gets right in my face and then says, "You fucking stupid bitch, screw you." And he spits on my shoes and shoulder bumps me as he walks away. I ran to my car to get in immediately, locking the doors as I calm down and buckle myself in. I feel a prickle underneath my skin, like I'm being watched. Look over to see he is watching me get into my car, and he watches me sit down and get ready to drive away. It was really unnerving.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.